How does a girl go from being mocked in high school to standing at the White House podium, fielding questions from the world's sharpest journalists like it's a game of chess? It's a question people ask a lot these days, sometimes with admiration, sometimes with disbelief, and often with a trace of envy. Because Karoline Leavitt isn't just in the spotlight, she owns it.
Calm.
Controlled. Brilliant. Unflinching in the face of chaos. But what they don't know, what no one ever talks about, is that it all started in a cold, fluorescent-lit classroom on an otherwise boring Tuesday afternoon. That was the day they tried to humiliate her. And that was the day they learned never to underestimate Karoline Leavitt. Ridgeview High didn't have many legends. The football team hadn't won a title in years. The drama club was more dramatic offstage than on. And the students, well, they followed the usual hierarchy. Athletes, influencers, quiet kids, and the occasional outlier no one could quite categorize. Karoline was one of those. She wasn't popular in the way yearbook photos remembered. She didn't host parties or post thirst traps or campaign for homecoming queen. But she had something else. Something sharper. A mind that made people nervous. Especially people like Brett Finley. "Dude," he whispered to Josh, leaning back in his chair during fifth period calculus. "Let's do it. Let's throw her up there. Make her solve the bonus problem. That'll shut her up for a change." Josh smirked. "You sure? That one looks like it eats people for breakfast." "Exactly." Brett grinned. "Let's see her choke." At the front of the room, Mr. Dalton, a man whose tie looked like it had survived several coffee wars, was scribbling equations on the board. The bonus problem he'd mentioned was supposed to be a fun challenge, something for extra credit. Something hard. Brett raised his hand with a mock-innocent smile. "Mr. Dalton? Maybe someone in the class can try it out, show the rest of us how it's done." Dalton paused, intrigued. "Go on." Josh chimed in, playing his part. "What about Karoline? She's, super into this stuff." A few students snorted. The challenge was clear. This wasn't about math. This was about ego. All eyes turned to Karoline, who had been quietly taking notes at her desk, pencil moving in smooth, practice strokes. She looked up, slow and steady, like someone adjusting a microscope. For a moment, she said nothing. Then she smiled. "Sure," she said. "I'll take a swing at it. Might be fun." There was something about her voice, calm, unbothered, maybe even a little amused. It made Brett's smirk falter. She walked up to the whiteboard like she'd done it 100 times before, took the marker from Mr. Dalton and scanned the equation. It was a beast. Nested functions, abstract variables, derivative chains, and a sneaky limit tucked into the middle like a trap. It wasn't just hard, it was mean. But Karoline didn't flinch. Instead, she capped the marker and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "There's a flaw in the problem." Mr. Dalton blinked. "Excuse me? You left out a key piece," she said. "You wrote f, x plus h, without introducing h or dividing by it. If this is supposed to be a difference quotient, you need the limit as h approaches 0. A hush fell over the room. Dalton leaned forward, rechecked his writing, and sighed. "She's right." Brett's smirk died completely. Someone whispered, "No way." "I'll fix it," Dalton muttered, grabbing the marker. "My mistake." As he corrected the problem, Karoline stepped aside, waiting patiently. She wasn't bragging. She wasn't mocking. She was just waiting, like a chess player eyeing the board. Once the problem was corrected, she stepped up again. She started writing. The room went silent except for the rhythmic squeak of marker on board. Symbols unfolded. Chains unlinked. Variables danced into place like soldiers in formation. What looked like chaos to most began revealing order, structure, elegance. For minutes later, she stopped, drew a box around her final answer, and turned. Mr. Dalton stared. "That's correct," he said. "Perfectly correct." A few people clapped, not mockingly this time. Genuinely. Even a little stunned. Karoline handed the marker back, her voice casual. "Next time you try to make someone look stupid," she said, glancing at Brett, "you might want to make sure you can solve the problem first." She returned to her seat like nothing had happened. But something had. Because for the first time, the class didn't just see the political girl. They saw what she really was. A force. Years later, when reporters grilled her under the blazing White House lights, they still didn't know what Brett and Josh had learned that day in calculus class. Karoline Leavitt doesn't back down. She does math in her sleep. She wins with silence. And she never, ever forgets the lesson hidden in every equation. The bell rang like a starter pistol, but no one bolted from their seats the way they usually did. For a full 5 seconds, the room sat frozen, the collective brain of Ridgeview High's 5th period calculus class trying to process what had just happened. Karoline had walked back to her desk.
Calm.
Unbothered. Still scribbling in her notebook like she didn't just verbally decapitate the 2 loudest guys in school and solve a calculus death trap on a whim. Then, slowly, the spell broke. Backpacks zipped. Chairs scraped. Feet shuffled. The usual chaos resumed, but quieter now. Almost careful. Josh muttered something under his breath as he passed Brett, who hadn't moved since the board showdown. She really did it, Josh said. Like, fast. Shut up, Brett hissed. Karoline heard it. She just didn't care. She waited until the crowd thinned out before standing. She had one more class before the day ended, but she already knew what was coming. Whispers. Stares. People looking at her with a different kind of curiosity. And she was right. Yo, Karoline, someone called in the hallway. You work for NASA or something? She didn't break stride. Another student gave her a respectful nod. That was legit. A girl she barely knew. Ava, maybe? Grinned as she passed. I wouldn't mess with you. Ever. Karoline didn't smile.
Not yet.
But she felt it, the shift. Not popularity. Not approval. Something better. Power.
It wasn't about being liked.
It was about being respected. And in a school like Ridgeview, where popularity was often louder than intelligence, that respect had to be earned the hard way. Still, she knew better than to think the battle was over. Brett Finley wasn't the kind of guy to take a public L and let it go. 6th period was government class, ironically, one of Karoline's favorites. She loved systems. How power moved. Who pulled the strings. Why people followed or rebelled. The teacher, Ms. Donnelly, was a no-nonsense woman with sharp glasses and a sharper tone. She respected Karoline, even if they didn't always agree. Pop quiz, Donnelly announced as soon as the class settled in. Surprise. 5 questions, short answer, no multiple choice. Let's see who's been paying attention and who's been coasting. Groans rippled through the room, and papers were passed out. Karoline read the first question. 1. What constitutional principle allows the Supreme Court to overturn laws passed by Congress? Easy. Judicial review, established by Marbury versus Madison. She wrote it down without hesitation and moved on. Halfway through the quiz, a folded piece of paper slid across her desk. Karoline paused, glancing sideways.
Brett.
Sitting 2 rows over. Watching her. She looked down at the note. You think you're smarter than everyone now? Don't get cocky. No one likes a know-it-all. Karoline read it twice. Then calmly refolded the note, tore it in half, and dropped it in her bag without a second glance. Brett watched her like a shark circling. He wanted a reaction. A flinch. A sign that he still held some power. He got nothing. After class, Karoline was the last to leave. Ms. Donnelly called out, Leavitt. That answer on number 3. You referenced the dissenting opinion. Bold move. Karoline nodded. It was more interesting than the majorities. Donnelly smiled. Keep thinking like that. The world needs sharper minds. Outside, she stepped into the late afternoon sun, her shadow long on the cracked concrete. The building buzzed behind her, filled with lockers slamming, drama bubbling, gossip blooming, high school doing what it does. She walked calmly, like always. But inside, something was shifting. Something that said, you can keep pushing. You can keep winning. You don't need to yell to be heard. That night, while most students buried themselves in TikToks and Netflix, Karoline sat at her desk with her laptop open, not on social media, but reading policy reports and watching press briefings from the real White House. Not because she had to.
Because she wanted to.
Because someday, she'd be up there, not just solving math problems or scoring quiz points, but answering to the world. And when that day came, no one would be mocking her. In the years to come, that note from Brett would end up in a shoebox of memories, not out of pain, but as proof. Proof that even the smallest moment can ripple outward. That confidence isn't loud, it's steady.
Quiet.
Focused. And that sometimes the smartest move you can make is to let the board speak for itself. They didn't clap for her the next day. They watched her. And Karoline knew that in some ways, that was worse. She could feel it, The way conversations paused when she entered a room. The way whispers buzzed at the edge of her hearing like flies near a windowsill. It wasn't outright bullying. Not yet. But it was that subtle kind of pushback you only get when people feel threatened by someone they can't quite label. They couldn't beat her. So now they'd try to box her in. Lunchtime was usually a quiet time for Karoline. She'd sit at a side table near the windows, earbuds in, reviewing assignments or scrolling through policy forums like a total nerd, her words, not anyone else's. But today, as she walked into the cafeteria, she spotted something new. Someone had taped a sheet of paper to the wall near the lunch line. Top 5 smartest people who will still end up alone. Compiled by Ridgeview's realists. And right there at 1. Karoline Leavitt knows calculus, doesn't know people. Her stomach didn't drop. Her heart didn't race. She wasn't that fragile.
But she paused.
Just for a second. Then she walked up to the list, pulled it down, folded it neatly, and dropped it in the trash can without a word. Not because she was weak. Because it wasn't worth her time. What was worth her time came later that afternoon, when Ms. Donnelly called her into the classroom during study hall. "You're applying for the Easton Fellowship, right?" Donnelly asked, tapping a file folder on her desk. Karoline blinked. "I didn't know I was eligible yet." "You are. And I'm nominating you." The Easton Fellowship was no joke. A nationally competitive pre-college program in Washington, D.C., where future leaders interned, studied, and shadowed real-world policymakers. Only 5 students in the state were picked each year. Karoline felt something tighten in her chest, not nerves.
Drive.
"I'm in," she said instantly. Donnelly slid the folder across the desk. "Then you've got 1 week to submit your essay. Make it unforgettable." Karoline took the folder with both hands. And for the first time that week, she smiled. Not a smirk. Not a shield. A real smile. Of course, Brett found out. He always did. By Friday morning, the rumor had spread across campus that Leavitt's trying to be the next Candy Rice or something, and Brett, true to form, decided it was time to act. He didn't attack her directly. Not this time. He got clever. It started with a group chat. Someone created a fake account and sent a screenshot of a fabricated email thread, making it look like Karoline had once said she wanted to run for president to ban TikTok and force people to read history books. Half the school thought it was real. The other half didn't care. It was funny enough to believe. And suddenly, Karoline wasn't just smart girl who crushed the bonus problem. She was a meme. By lunchtime, someone had printed stickers with a cartoon version of her holding a book titled How to Ruin Fun, The Karoline Leavitt Guide to Boring Everyone. This time, she didn't fold it up and throw it away. She picked up one of the stickers, examined it, took a photo, and said, "Thanks. I needed a campaign logo." Later that day, in a digital space far beyond Ridgeview High's maturity level, she drafted the first lines of her Easton Fellowship essay. "The first time someone tried to define me, they used a sticker. Before that, it was an equation. Before that, a silence. I've learned that people will always try to simplify what they don't understand. But I don't exist to be simplified. I exist to lead." That night, while the group chat laughed and Brett told himself he was winning again, Karoline was up late, writing. Not tweeting. Not posting. Building. The kind of future people like Brett would one day have to explain to their kids when she appeared on their television screens. Not as a joke. As the voice of the nation. Every story of power has a pivot point, a moment when someone decides that mockery is fuel, not fire. That every insult is just unpaid advertising for their future. For Karoline, it wasn't the math problem. It was the sticker, the meme, the echo of laughter. That's what made her dangerous. That's what made her unstoppable. Karoline didn't usually read her essays out loud. But this one felt different. She sat on her bedroom floor, surrounded by crumpled drafts, highlighted articles, and a steaming mug of tea that had long gone cold. The glow of her laptop lit her face in the dim light, and she stared at the words like they were a mission statement. Leadership isn't the loudest voice in the room. It's the one that listens, calculates, and speaks when it matters most. I've learned to be that voice, Not because it was easy, but because silence taught me how. She paused, then kept reading. I was mocked for solving a calculus problem. Not because the problem was too hard, but because it was supposed to be. I wasn't expected to win. And I did. Not to prove a point, but to ask a better question. What would happen if more young women refused to lower their hand just to make others comfortable? It wasn't just an essay anymore. It was her origin story. She submitted it 3 days before the deadline. By then, the sticker meme had faded, replaced by the next viral moment, some senior who fell into a trash can on TikTok.
Classic.
But the whispers hadn't stopped. They'd just evolved. Now it was, did you hear her essay went viral with the selection committee? She's not just book smart. She's White House smart. Karoline tuned it out. She had work to do. But she did notice something strange during second period English that week. Brett didn't make eye contact anymore. And, even weirder, he'd stopped talking about her altogether. The results of the Easton Fellowship came in 2 weeks later. She opened the email alone, in the Ridgeview Library, the same place where she'd spent so many silent lunches, hiding in the stacks with policy books and debate club research. Congratulations, Karoline Leavitt. You've been selected. She stared at it. Not because she was surprised. Because she wasn't. That afternoon, Ms. Donnelly called her to the front of the classroom and clapped once to get everyone's attention. I don't usually do this, she said, but I'm making an exception. She looked at Karoline. Tell them what happened. Karoline hesitated. The room went still. I got the Easton Fellowship, she said. Silence. Then a voice in the back. That's like a big deal, right? Ms. Donnelly folded her arms. Bigger than any of you know. It's the kind of opportunity that turns students into senators. A few people nodded. Someone whistled. Someone else muttered, dang. And then unexpectedly clapping. Real clapping. Even from people who had barely spoken to her all year. Not everyone, but enough. After class, as Karoline packed her bag, someone tapped her on the shoulder. It was Josh, Brett's right-hand man. She turned slowly. He scratched the back of his neck. Hey, I know we were kind of jerks before. That whole bonus problem thing was messed up. Karoline raised an eyebrow. Kind of. He smirked, embarrassed. Okay, very. She didn't say anything. I read part of your essay, he added. Ms. Donnelly showed us a quote. It hit different. You're really smart. Like not just brain smart, strategically smart. Karoline zipped her backpack. That sounds dangerously close to a compliment. He smiled. Guess it is. She nodded once. Thanks. And just like that, the air shifted again. That night, she got an email. Subject line, White House Correspondence Program, Summer Invite. It was from one of the Easton sponsors, who had shown her essay to a connection in D.C. They wanted her in the room. Not someday. This summer. There are moments in life where your future quietly knocks on the door and waits. But sometimes it doesn't knock. Sometimes it breaks the door open and says, You ready? Karoline wasn't just ready. She'd been waiting for them to catch up. They told her it was just an internship. They didn't tell her it would feel like walking into a chessboard where every piece already had a favorite, and she was the wild card no one saw coming. The Eisenhower Executive Office building towered above her, all limestone and American flags, as Karoline stepped through security with a badge that had her name spelled out in bold black letters. Karoline Leavitt, Easton Fellow. She held her bag close, heart pounding but face calm. She'd practiced this, shoulders straight, chin level, eyes ahead. It was all about composure now. Because this wasn't Ridgeview High. This was the edge of power. Her first briefing was in a small but immaculate room with a long oval table, polished to a shine. Around it sat 20 other fellows, all top of their class, all dressed like they'd walked out of political dramas.
Yale.
Stanford. Georgetown. Karoline clocked the glances right away. She wasn't from an elite school. She didn't name-drop senators. She didn't carry herself like she'd already arrived. But that made her more dangerous. Because she knew she didn't have to prove she belonged. She already did. Let's begin with an exercise, said the director. a tall man with icy blue eyes and a folder full of files. You'll each get 5 minutes to respond to a policy scenario. Speak as if you're briefing the White House press secretary. We'll start alphabetically. Karoline's heart ticked up. Leavitt. That meant she'd be near the end. Time to read the room. As each student spoke, she listened, not just to what they said, but how they said it. Most of them sounded brilliant.
Polished.
But rehearsed. No risk. No edge. By the time it was her turn, the room was already drifting.
Bored.
Satisfied. She stood slowly, paperless. Most of you focused on the policy optics, she began. Which matters, until it doesn't. That got their attention. Karoline took one slow step toward the center of the room. You said we should spin the narrative. I say we control the reality. You gave the press secretary talking points. I'd give them strategy. Because in real power, perception isn't everything, timing is. Dead silence. Then the director leaned forward. Go on.
So she did.
She laid out a full plan, not just for messaging, but shifting public opinion, managing internal leaks, and creating a sense of inevitability around the administration's position. She spoke with no notes, no fear. When she finished, the room was still. Then the director tapped his pen twice. Impressive. One word. But the others heard it. And Karoline felt it. She'd just won the room. Over the next week, she didn't just thrive. She climbed. She asked the smartest questions. Stayed after every session. Met quietly with staffers during lunch breaks. They started noticing her. Not just the Easton mentors, but real players. People with West Wing clearance. Communications officers. Policy advisors. She wasn't loud, but she was sharp. Every word had weight. But with attention comes tension. And by week 2, a new name had entered her world. Mira Hollings.
Yale.
4th-generation political legacy. Spoke 5 languages. Sharp stilettos. Sharper tongue. And she didn't like being overshadowed. It started subtly. A misplaced document that Karoline definitely left on the desk. A sarcastic compliment during a group debrief. Wow, Karoline didn't know Ridgeview taught geopolitical nuance. Then, a whisper in the hallway. She's just playing the underdog card. The whole smart small-town girl against the machine routine. Karoline didn't flinch. She dealt with Brett Finley. Mira Hollings was just Brett in better shoes. But she also knew something else. This wasn't high school. These people played dirty. Quietly. Professionally. That Friday, Karoline was scheduled to attend a closed-door session with a real White House deputy communications chief. Except her name wasn't on the list. She checked the email. She had been invited. But someone had switched the roster.
Deliberately.
Mira smiled when Karoline passed her in the corridor. Oh, weren't you supposed to be in briefing 3? Karoline didn't answer. She pivoted. Straight to the program director's office. Sir, she said calmly, my access was removed from today's comm session. I have email confirmation I was on the list. He looked up, studied her face, and nodded. Come with me. They walked straight into the West Wing entrance. Past interns. Past staffers. Past the people who thought this girl from Ridgeview wouldn't know how to navigate real power. He took her into a side conference room and sat her down across from the deputy herself. You've got 20 minutes, he said. Impress her.
No one else got that chance.
Karoline didn't just impress. She redefined the conversation. Every room Karoline entered, she walked in like she had nothing to prove, but everything to offer. And the difference showed. She didn't fake it. She didn't charm her way in. She strategized her way to the center. And when doors closed, she didn't knock. She found another way in. It started with a single headline. Leaked briefing sparks diplomatic firestorm with European allies. By noon, the story was trending on every major outlet. By 1 p.m., the press was circling the White House like vultures. And by 1:30 p.m., Karoline Leavitt was in a secure conference room, not as a fellow, but as a fire extinguisher. Here's what happened. Earlier that week, during a simulated communications exercise, Karoline had written a sample response to a hypothetical international incident involving military collaboration, trade policy, and the potential withdrawal of an ally from a joint initiative. It was sharp, unapologetic, strategic. Someone had forwarded it to another staffer,
Who forwarded it again?
and somewhere along the way, someone mistook it for a real White House position. It got leaked. And now the world thought the US was threatening to pull funding from 3 allied programs in Europe. An international PR disaster, and it had Karoline's fingerprints all over it. She wasn't in trouble, but she was in the spotlight. "They know you didn't authorize anything," the Easton director said, pacing behind her in the small room. "But the language, it's good. Too good. Some folks up top want to know who wrote it, and why it reads better than half their own comm staff." Karoline sat motionless. "So," he said finally, "they want to hear from you." She looked up slowly. "You mean?"
Yes.
Briefing room C, 10 minutes. When Karoline stepped into the small chamber, it was filled with 5 people she recognized from news coverage: White House advisors, national security comms officers, and one press strategist who looked like he hadn't slept in 2 days. "Miss Leavitt," one of them said, not looking up from his notes, "you wrote the draft that's being misquoted abroad?" She nodded. "Yes, sir. As part of a simulation. You do realize the phrasing in here," he held up a printed copy, "implies conditional support withdrawal?" Karoline didn't flinch. "It also implies urgency, which was the point. The goal is to simulate a recalibration of diplomatic tone without inciting panic." That made one of them raise an eyebrow. Another leaned forward. "Would you care to walk us through your thinking?" And so she did. Karoline went line by line. Explained not just the what, but the why. Her logic, her word choices, the diplomatic theory behind her tone. All of it laid bare, calmly, professionally, like she was one of them. By the time she finished, the room was silent. Then the National Security Comms chief said something Karoline would never forget. "This is the most precise draft we've seen all week. You may have saved us from a misstep. We're using your language with attribution." Karoline blinked. "With attribution?" He nodded. "The world already thinks you're a staffer. We're not going to lie. We'll clarify that it was a fellow's simulation. But your words are staying in. Approved by the West Wing." When she walked out of the room, Mira was standing in the hallway. She didn't say anything, didn't smirk, didn't blink, just watched as Karoline, the girl from Ridgeview, the calculus kid, the meme target, walked past her into history. Later that day, a journalist tweeted, "White House clarifies leaked document was from Easton Fellow simulation. Intern's draft saved the day, smart, composed, strategic. Expect to hear the name Karoline Leavitt again." It went viral. By evening, her phone was vibrating nonstop. Text after text. And one email that stopped her breath. "Would love to talk. We're recruiting for next summer's press assistant pool. Let's connect. Deputy Director, WH Comms." Everyone wants to talk about the moment someone arrives. But no one talks about the moment they're tested. Karoline wasn't just rising. She was getting fire forged in real time. And instead of cracking under the pressure, she crystallized. The auditorium smelled the same. Old velvet seats. Freshly waxed floors. The faint whiff of cafeteria pizza lingering in the corners. But everything else had changed. Karoline Leavitt stepped through the side door of Ridgeview High's auditorium, not as a student, but as the keynote speaker. The seniors were graduating today. And the girl who had once been mocked for raising her hand too often was now standing backstage, holding a small stack of notes with a White House press credential still clipped to her coat pocket. She peeked through the curtain. The crowd was buzzing. Parents with camcorders. Friends holding up signs. Teachers lined up near the front. And in the second row, Brett Finley. Graduating with honors. Still smug. Still loud. Still acting like he ran the place. Karoline didn't flinch. She just smiled. Principal Ruiz took the stage first, giving the usual blend of encouragement and cliches. Then came the moment. "Please welcome our distinguished guest speaker," he announced. An alumna of Ridgeview and recently featured in the Washington Post for her work with the White House communications team, Miss Karoline Leavitt. Applause erupted. Some real. Some surprised. A few even stunned. She walked out slowly, heels clicking against the wood, her posture calm and steady, but her eyes scanning the crowd like a strategist reading a room. She didn't look at Brett, but she knew he was watching. She started with a question, the same way her journey had started. What if the thing they mock you for becomes the reason you win? Silence. Then stillness. Good. I remember sitting in this auditorium 4 years ago. I wasn't the loudest. I wasn't the most popular. I didn't win prom queen. But I did raise my hand during a calculus lesson and got laughed at for solving something no one was supposed to. A few heads turned toward Brett. She kept going. They thought mocking intelligence would keep it small. But here's the thing about intelligence. It doesn't shrink. It sharpens. And one day, it walks into rooms that most people only dream about, and it doesn't ask permission. It makes decisions. You could have heard a pin drop. Then she told a story. Not the viral version. The real one. How her essay opened a door. How a leak turned into a global test. How she sat across from real power and didn't blink. But her voice never turned boastful. Just measured. I didn't get here because I was perfect. I got here because I didn't let the people who underestimated me decide what I could be. Because every snide comment, every laugh behind my back, that wasn't a wall. That was fuel. When she finished, she looked up from her notes. So if you're sitting there, wondering if your voice matters, it does. If you're doubting your place at the table, pull up a chair anyway. Because genius doesn't ask for validation. It creates its own gravity.
She paused.
I'll see some of you in rooms you never thought you'd be in. And if not, I'll still remember where I came from. Thunderous applause. A standing ovation, even from teachers who once thought she was too much. And in the second row, Brett Finley clapped slowly, with a tight jaw and a look that said everything. He finally understood. She didn't need his approval. She never did. The girl who was mocked for being too smart? She gave a graduation speech that made people want to be smarter. And as Karoline walked off stage, she didn't look back. Because her future wasn't behind her. It was waiting just outside the door. 3 years later, the stage lights were hotter, brighter, and the stakes higher than ever. Karoline Leavitt sat across from journalist Claire Renard, host of the nation's most-watched Sunday political show, Real Talk. The cheer beneath her name read, Karoline Leavitt, rising political strategist, former White House communications advisor. Claire leaned in, smiling sharply. You've been called everything from a prodigy to a disruptor. But you've also been underestimated, repeatedly. Why do you think that is? Karoline didn't blink. I think people are comfortable when smart women stay quiet. And I didn't. Claire laughed. And now? Karoline just smiled. Now they listen. The interview went viral before it even ended. Clips of her responses, her poised confidence, her effortless delivery, all over social media. The girl who once solved a calculus problem in high school as a joke played on her was now setting the national conversation. But it wasn't about fame for Karoline. It never was. It was about what came next. 2 months later, she was invited to speak at the National Student Leadership Summit, an auditorium filled with top students from every state. Some already had internships, scholarships, or startups. But others were just kids who were still trying to believe in themselves. She scanned the crowd before she began. Eyes wide. Phones ready. Future leaders, some of them already carrying scars from being doubted, dismissed, or pushed aside. She knew them. She was them. So she ditched her notes. And just spoke. When I was your age, I thought intelligence had to look a certain way. Wear the right blazer, speak the right way, go to the right school. But it doesn't. Smart isn't a brand. It's a weapon. And you don't have to soften it for anyone. Later that night, as she walked backstage, a girl stopped her. Couldn't have been older than 14. Thick glasses, oversized backpack, hair in a messy bun. Her voice shook. Miss Leavitt, I just wanted to say, I used to hide how smart I was. But after hearing you, I won't anymore. Karoline looked down at her and saw herself again. That same uncertainty. That same fire. What's your name? She asked. Jenna. Karoline smiled. Well, Jenna, next time you're in class and you know the answer, raise your hand. The girl hesitated. Even if they laugh? Karoline didn't miss a beat, especially if they laugh. That night, back in her hotel room, Karoline opened her inbox. Among the dozens of requests and headlines was one email with a familiar subject line. Welcome to the 40 under 40 list, Time magazine feature draft attached. She clicked it open, read the first sentence, and sat back, exhaling slowly. Karoline Leavitt didn't just change the conversation. She redefined who gets to lead it. Every great story starts with doubt. But the unforgettable ones? They end with belief, not just in the hero, but in everyone who sees themselves in her. And somewhere in a quiet classroom, a hand rises again, this time without fear.